hearing is officially closed. We have definitely, first of all, let's give the Overtown residents, stakeholders, and supporters of Overtown a hand tonight. I have to say this, as I wind down my tenure, it is so amazing to see where we started from in the very beginning in public process and where we are now. To actually have a hearing like this where we as residents or the residents can actually get on the mic and really communicate what the real issues, their real concerns are to make sure they actually go into a document. There was no screaming, no hollering, there's no, nothing done out of order, and it was done in a very peaceful way, but yet in still a very stern way to make sure that our voices were heard. So I definitely want to make sure we give them another hand for doing a job well done. Now, in closing, there's a couple things that I do want to add, and I think it's important for those that came into the meeting later and didn't really understand why we were doing the meeting. As I stated from the very beginning, this is a process that we actually put in place. As a matter of fact, it came from the many Saturday meetings that we had with many of the historic-based organizations. Every Saturday we would meet at the CRA to really talk about creating a destination, to really talk about what we really wanted to see in the area, to make sure that as we began to build and develop in the area, that actually happened. So part of those many, many discussions that we had was really making sure that everyone was clear about what was happening in the community. So what you saw tonight, this is not, there were comments around this is unusual, why is this happening? We've been doing this for the last 8 years. If there's a major project where city or CRA land is in it, we definitely want to make sure that at least you know what's happening with the projects. So I wanted to make sure that I cleared up that comment. Just some quick little notes, and what I would like to ask the staff to do after this hearing is to, one, make sure that the notes and the recommendation are actually put down in a physical document and at least posted on the CRA website to make sure that this conversation does not get lost. So I'm going to ask that the CRA director and our legal folks here make sure that we do that. But the resounding things that actually came out of this meeting, which is usually what comes out of this meeting, is us really fleshing out the community benefits agreement, were a few things. And I just want to make sure, and I'm just going to touch the tip of the iceberg because these are the things that were mentioned once, twice, or 3 times tonight. The first thing was the issue of jobs. It seems as though the community has made it very clear that when we talk about jobs, that both bidders have to understand that we're dealing with a certain demographic and that we need to make sure that we're not creating jobs for individuals that, yes, there are people that don't have a criminal record, but there are people that do. So one of the resounding things that came out of this discussion tonight was to make sure that we consider both and all. One of the other things that came out of this meeting was the fact that we do need to have in either one of these bidders' proposals some sort of monitoring put in place that includes some sort of fine if you don't meet the obligations. Because we know in Overtown and we know in other areas throughout our district, people have made empty promises. In the end, we cannot quantify it when they don't do what they say they're going to do. So we want to make sure that that is in the agreements. The other thing that came up over and over was education. The partnership with the schools, we need to make sure that that is definitely a part of the agreement, and we can flesh that out, but it needs to be included in the agreement. Another resounding thing that came out is it's obvious that the selling of the land is definitely not something that the community is in support of. It seems as though the feeling is that, the agreement has to include some sort of partnership for the leasing of the land so that there is a revenue stream on an ongoing basis. I have to say that when I was briefed by Clarence on this issue, I had a serious concern about monies being offered for the land, honestly. That was a big issue for me, especially when I saw that it was really, the land wasn't. I understand that there's a question as to whether or not it's really 20 million, but if that's what the documents say, or if that's what comes back to, you know, it says it's worth $20 million, then we can't just negate it and say $7 million we'll be happy with. So I heard the community loud and clear on the issue of partnership for the land. The other thing that came out really clear tonight was youth participation. It seems like that's very, very high on the list tonight. A couple of people have talked about the future of Overtown. We need to make sure that there's some sort of space incorporated in the project, and that definitely there's a revenue stream that's set aside for the future residents of Overtown. The other thing that came out a couple of times, which I think is a wonderful idea, is that we do need to try to figure out a way, just like we do in every other community, is to try to figure out some way to include a green plan in what we're doing. I did not really hear that from either one of the groups that, unless I missed it, but I think that's a great recommendation that came tonight. The other thing that came up a couple of times was some sort of health study or analysis that addresses the effects of whatever building that's going to take place in the neighborhood. I think that we should definitely partner with University of Miami or one of these educational institutions to look at what we need to do in that particular community so that they're not affected by it. And then, of course, and again, these are just some of the things I know that were mentioned over and over again, which I think are very valid points, was the issue of traffic, and we see what has happened downtown on Brickell with the new big project happening there. If we don't have a traffic plan or a traffic study, then everything that we're doing with the Lyric and other things that we're trying to get done in that particular community will be affected because of the traffic issues. And that's going to be an issue outside of these lots because you have a lot of things that are happening on the opposite side of the railroad. So I'm asking for staff, these are just things that I know and off the top of my head that I wrote down, but I do want to make sure that we include this document online, so it needs to be actually put online as soon as possible so that they would have it. Now, I want to be clear once again that before this process even started, it was very clear from our ongoing negotiations with the county. This has been something that's been going on a very long time. As a matter of fact, since I've been in office with the county in this land. This reverter issue, however, is something that's come up over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. Right, but I'm saying, but the going back and forth with the county, and the county saying if we cannot build the project in, 3 years or 4 years, 3 years, right? And that is a challenging thing for developers because, on both sides, because we're talking about if you're not coming out of the ground and these projects are not actually moving, then that land actually goes back to the county. And then we have a whole nother process where we're waiting another 3 years trying to figure out what we're gonna do. Quite frankly, okay, we lose the land, but I'm sure the community would stand up to keep the land. But my point is, the reality is, after the 3 years, you're still gonna need more time to even put something back out, whether or not it's the city or county. So that is time that we did not wanna lose, because the reality is when you look at OT, everything that's happening around OT, and I'm saying everything west of or east of the railroad tracks is moving. We cannot afford to lose any time for OT. OT needs to happen. We need life to happen within the area. The only way the Lyric Theater is going to survive is if there's people that are coming there. Only way businesses are gonna survive if there's activity happening there. So we cannot afford to lose another 10 years trying to figure out what we're gonna do. So I wanna be very clear, the whole purpose of us pushing it is not because there's something mystical or secretive going on. It's because Overtown has waited long enough and it's time to get something done. So that is the reason for the push, and quite frankly, those that participated in the meetings on Saturday, and I know I took much of my time from my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old, they might have been 4 then, on my Saturdays, and Dr. Fields and the whole Hofstra crew knows this, sitting in rooms talking about what do we need to do to make sure Overtown gets what it needs. So finally, this stuff is actually coming to light. So what I wanted to, yes. Okay, I want to thank, can I do that last meal? Okay, I'm going to thank the Camilla's House for hosting us tonight. Let's give them a hand. and cooking for us and giving us wonderful drinks tonight. Okay, so let me get down to the real business of what I would like to see happen from this meeting. I've already given you the recommendations, but I do want to say this to staff. I think that the community benefits agreement does need to be flushed out a lot more than what it is, and I think that it needs to be very clear about what that is. So I'm going to ask for staff, and honestly, and I said this earlier, I kind of feel like staff, for whatever reason, has felt a push from I don't know where, because it definitely didn't come from me on this instance, to get something resolved on who wins the bid. And the reality for me, from day one after hearing who won the bid, was that it made no sense to me, just speaking from my perspective, whoever wins the bid is who you deal with first. That's just what it is. So I want to say there's three things that I thought was really important about tonight's meeting. And as a part of the wrap-up, I think that there's going to be a recommendation that I remove staff from this process, because I think it's creating a bigger issue and it's creating less transparency on this issue. So the first thing that I'm going to say is this process for me, and anything that we do in OT, even after I'm gone, it should always be about three things. One, we always respect the people. We may not always agree with what people are making recommendations for, but we respect the people. We respect the people in making sure that we hear from them. So this process tonight, for me, is always important, because everything that anybody has to say is important, because guess what? The folks from OT that have invested their time, their families, whatever happens for them in this community is more important than anybody that's gonna come and build and leave. So we always must respect the folks and what they feel needs to happen in the community. And that's the reason why I wanted to get these items put down for the community benefits, to make sure that they're not lost, because you're hearing it from the people themselves, not from a select group, but from the entire community. So now you leave this process. The other part of this is that we respect the community stakeholders. And I'm saying outside of the residents, and again, we got the word out. We tried to make sure that as many people knew about the information today, but when I say respect the community stakeholders, I'm talking about the organizations that are historical organizations in that particular community, making sure that their input is included, not just the logo or not just making a comment, but really having their input. Before both sides started, I was very clear that, guys, if you're gonna get anything done, you need to make sure you find out what the plan is for the area. Why some people dropped the ball, why it did not happen, I'm not sure why, but if we move forward, that plan, the Haftia plan, has to be included. And then last but not least, for me, this project is a transformational project, and I have to say my last issue of respect is respect the process. And I said it earlier, and I leaned over to ask my city attorney, because I wanted to be clear. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just making a decision or having a discussion about something, and I might have been wrong. I asked the question, Bill, have we ever, in the 8 years that I've been here, given the project or the bidder, the second bidder, the projects? And he had to say no. And then I asked him, why is this different now? And he couldn't answer. That's a problem for me, because we have to be consistent with what we do. You know, we can't say it works this one way for one group, but it doesn't work the rest for the other group. And I do know that we have had situations where we have put out something to bid, and we have given the land away, and the developers were not able to complete and do what they had to do. And guess what? It came back to us, right? And I understand the executive director, he does have the latitude to decide how he wants to, negotiate. He hasn't done anything wrong. I just think that if we're gonna do things right, you have to be consistent. When that land came back to us from that other project that went out, Then we figured out what we're going to do with the land after that. But you have to allow people the opportunity, if they win the bid, they should have the opportunity to at least negotiate first. Now, let me say this. Clarence and I don't agree on this, okay? And that's fine. And that's fine, and he has his viewpoint of what he feels on this. But ultimately, I'm responsible to the people, and ultimately, I'm responsible to God. So I am not going to ever put myself in a position and make a decision that I know is not based on truth. So if I can't do it for everybody that has applied, for us in the last 8 years, if I'm not operating from that same perspective, then why are we doing this? So the number one bidder in this is the Gateway Project. So am I saying it right? The Gateway Project. Overtown Gateway Project. They are the number one bidder. Now, again, we do have to bring this item in front of the City Commission. I'm not the only person that has to make this decision. There are other people that are going to have to vote on this item. But I'm going to be very strong in my position about what we must do, and we must do the right thing. So I do want to say this. I did make a phone call coming here prior to the call, because this is really bothered me. I went away to spend time with my boys for the summer, and I disconnected from everything because I thought it was really important for me to put my family for the first time in 8 years first. And so I didn't get engaged in this process, and Clarence can tell you, when I got back, I'm starting to get all these phone calls about what's going on. So I really tried to make sure every time someone called, and I'm sure y'all recall, and I don't want to talk about this, I'll see you at the community hearing. But today I did something a little different, because on the way coming over, and Neil can tell you, 30 minutes before the meeting, I said, you know what? I need to call myself one of the members that sat on the review process. Because quite frankly, if you instill or you appoint 3 people that you trust to go through a process and select them, you have to respect that group that said this was the number one bidder. And I had to ask her, and mind you, I'm not talking about a person that does not understand this business. This is somebody that because I had to ask, and I'll say her name because it's not an issue, Pat Brannon. Been in the business for 30 years. She's at a conference right now, stepped out to chat with me. I said, Pat, this is really bothering me because I want to do what's right. I said, I need to understand why you chose bidder number 1. I need to hear it. So she told me, she said, the first thing that came out of her mouth was that she felt that very confident in bidder number 1's financial ability to do the project, which was a little different from what I had been briefed on. I'm just going to be real. And I said, okay, this is somebody we appointed to the process. We're going to respect the process, right? The person 30 years in this business, housing and finance, is built all over Miami-Dade County, is telling me that number 1 has the ability to do the project financially. I said, okay, so then what were the other reasons? And she basically said, I felt that, and not just me, but the 2 other members of the committee felt that their original project, it focused on the character of the community. They went out of their way to make sure that there were key elements included in the project. The second bidder did not have that. It was a pretty bland project. And for them, they felt that this really represented closer to what the residents needed to see. The other thing she talked about was jobs, key jobs and community concerns. She felt, along with the other 2 people that my director put on that committee to select, felt the same way. So then I'm sitting there saying, on my way driving here, as a matter of fact, before I got off the phone with her, I actually had Neil speak to her, and I said, please tell me how this typically goes, because we've never had this as an issue. And this is what she said to me. She said, Commissioner, I'm going to be honest with you, both are great projects. I think that bidder number 2, there were key things that should have been in the original proposal that perhaps were not there. There was a lot of emphasis maybe perhaps put on the train, which, by the way, we think is great for the community. And I'm going to go on record saying I think it's awesome for the community. I think that it's great that we're gonna be able to have people coming into OT that might have not come. Those people getting off the train, they're gonna wanna eat. Those people getting off the train, they're gonna want to participate in what we're building there. So let's not be, I don't want all aboard to feel in any way that I'm not in support of that, because I think it's a lot of value to the neighborhood. But I wanted to ask her opinion. So I said, well, what do you normally do when a situation like this arises? And she said, well, first, I only negotiate with bidder number one. And if I see that bidder number two is a great project, I say to bidder number one and bidder number two, y'all got to figure out a way to work it out. I said, well, and I'm not going to say who said it, they don't want to work it out, because I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But one of the members, I said, well, what do you do when someone doesn't want to work it out and they're arrogant about working with somebody else? I don't want to say who that is. She said, then you go with bidder number one. So my point, and I'm saying bidder number one, whoever came in first. So, but she said to me, and she was very clear, she said, but Commissioner, this is a little different kind of situation because you have two wonderful, great projects. If there's any way that you can remove staff, that wasn't even my recommendation, correct, Neil? She said, Michelle, I think that the staff has gotten too deep into it, and they may be drowning in trying to make the right decision. And sometimes you can be influenced without you even knowing that you're influenced. I feel like this is her recommendation, was that staff needs to be removed out of the process, and bidder number one and bidder number two have to sit down, because both sides of the coin are great projects. Did she not say this, Neil? Right. She said, and let them work it out. Remove your team out of the process, because it's a problem now. So I'm saying this to say that we are voting on this item next week, because I think that it's important, and OT has worked a very long time. I'm going to say in closing on this, you've heard the community, and that was the whole purpose of it. You heard the issues that they want to see included in their, in the project. You also heard them say that they love both projects. Some people had issues with one or the other, but for the most part, both projects are great projects, and I'm excited about either or project, okay? But I'm gonna go with somebody that has, quite frankly, 30 years of experience in doing this. Someone that's not in any way feeling pressure from either side to make a decision. And I'm gonna ask bidder number one and bidder number two, we meet again on September the 12th, and I am going to have this item on the agenda, and we're going to deal with it, and we're gonna take a vote. And I'm hoping that both sides will figure out what makes the best sense for our community. And that's where I am in this process. I am a little disappointed, you know, as I transition out of this, you know, office with, you know, I have friends, like I said, on both sides that are supportive in all ways for our community. I think there's great resources on both sides that can do tremendous things for OT to really help turn it around. And to see the bickering that has happened between both of these projects, it's a little disheartening to leave out of office with this kind of lingering there, you know, and I'm just hoping and praying that you guys figure out a way that's going to be great for the entire community of Overtown. This is a transformational project. Make no mistakes about it, this is OT land. It's gotta be for the people, with the people, by the people, and let me be clear. I wanna be very clear on this. It doesn't matter if the person's white, purple, green, orange, whatever if they were number one, they should win. So if all aboard, I don't care if they were green, purple, orange, whatever color, if they came in first, I'll be doing the same thing. Same thing. So I don't want from tonight anyone to leave to feel like it was a black or white issue, because there were some comments made about the selection committee. And I'm like, you know what, this is incredible. Because many times we've had selection committees that didn't have any people of color sitting on it, and nobody ever questioned that. Come on now. We gotta get beyond that. If we're gonna really grow the community, if we're gonna really change the community, find a way for us all to work together. I think there's some value in both projects. So with that being said, I am officially—
Before you close out, please allow me to make a clarification on some of the things that you said, because while I respect you, and you know, you are the chair of the Southeast Overtown Parkway CRA, I think some of the things that you've mentioned are not, you know, exact, and you are correct in saying that the 8 years that you've been here, this situation hasn't happened, because when it did happen, you weren't the commissioner. For these same blocks, and I may have mentioned this to you before, these same blocks, when the RFP went out for Crosswinds, there were 2 bidders that were considered. And there was a bidder that proffered a better deal than the one that was selected by the Crosswinds developers. But the CRA chose Crosswinds developers. That's the first point. The second thing is, when we receive the recommendations, if you think that the right thing or the proper thing to do was to advance to the CRA board one of the developers, regardless of who it is, without there being any due diligence, then, you know, there is no need for me to weigh in at all, period, because basically what you're doing is you're accepting the review committee's recommendation and you're sending it on to the board without there being any vetting at all. And I accept that. That's no problem. I have no problem with that. And if that's the way you want to do it, that's proper. But as the executive director, I have a responsibility to these same people that you're talking about, the Southeast Overtown Park West residents, and understanding the totality of the problem, of the situation. This isn't just a normal RFP. This isn't a simple situation where we put out land and then we, you know, sit and talk to bidders. This is the settlement. This is part of a settlement agreement that we're working with the county, where we are under a time constraint. We are under time constraint.
Right.
But you need to know, what you do need to know is that what I said to both proposers when I sat with them is that once we sit down and we do some due diligence, if it comes back that all things being equal, I will make the recommendation of the top ranked proposal. And I think both of them will tell you that. So for some reason, it now gets to the point to where you're saying that we are, you know, somehow not giving deference or respect to the top ranked proposal. I think that is totally wrong. It's totally inaccurate. It's totally inaccurate. If you don't want me to do any due diligence, then that's fine. We can send on the top ranked proposal.
Right, and what I'm
respectfully,
saying, and what I'm saying to you, Mr. Director, is that your selection committee, and I'm done with it, Clarence. Okay. I'm done with it for tonight.
I understand, and I respect exactly what you're saying.
So if you're going to respect what I have to say tonight.
Is the meeting officially over?
No, it's not. It's not yet. So at this point, I expect for it to be respected, that the meeting is officially, okay? So at this point, if we're not gonna be consistent with everything that we do, then we can't change the process in the middle of the road. So at this point, I've asked for both parties to try to figure out a way to work it out. And that came from the recommendation of a person that's done this for 30 years in the business, and that was her recommendation. Michelle, no, let me finish, because we're gonna close out this meeting. No, we're finished with public hearing, we're done with the issue. Okay, so it's extremely important that you guys figure out a way to work it out. With that being said, I thank everyone for coming out tonight. God bless.